Welcome to Phoenix Podcast, hosted by Amin Moinian, where we deep dive into economics and politics.
Today we're going to be looking at perspective that really, it kind of turns things on its head. You know how we normally think about capitalism?
Right.
You've brought some really cool ideas that suggest that the main benefit of this whole system isn't about, making the rich richer.
Right.
But it's about us, regular folks, the consumers, right?
Yeah.
And when we say consumers, we're talking about everyone, right?
Yeah, everyone. Absolutely.
So let's jump into this idea that supporting capitalism is at its heart, supporting, all of us, the consumers.
Yeah.
One of the things that's really interesting to think about right away is this idea that we're often presented with a false choice. It's like we have to choose between an economic system that's just designed to, enrich the people at the top versus, one that's all about the working class. And this viewpoint really pushes back against that.
Right.
It says that that's like a fundamentally inaccurate way to understand how capitalism, actually works at its core.
Okay, so let's ditch this idea that capitalism is inherently for the rich.
Right.
And socialism is for the poor.
Exactly.
This perspective is saying there's a different winner here.
Yeah.
It's saying capitalism at its core is really looking out for the consumers.
Yeah.
But, when we talk about consumers, it's easy to just picture,
right.
shoppers at the mall, right? But this is much bigger than that, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Who are we really talking about when we say, quote unquote, consumers in this context?
The argument here is that consumer means, every single person in society.
Okay.
Think about it. No matter what your job is,
right?
No matter how much money you make, no matter what your role in the economy is, you're a consumer, right?
Wow.
Whether you work in a factory or you're a CEO or you're a student or you're retired, everyone consumes goods and services to live their lives.
Okay.
So the idea is that keeping consumers happy and healthy is the most important thing for the system to work.
Right. We all got to buy groceries.
Exactly.
We all need a place to live.
Yeah.
We might need transportation, So if we're all consumers, how does capitalism specifically act as this protector or defender, especially for those of us who are maybe working with a tighter budget?
That's where the real power of the system comes in.
Okay.
People with lower incomes, they really need things to be affordable.
Yeah.
Because, they don't have as much money to spend.
Right.
And one of the core ideas of capitalism is this constant downward pressure on prices.
Okay.
It's all about competition, right? This drive to give people more bang for their buck.
Yeah.
It directly benefits the folks who have less to spend. So it allows them to get the most out of their limited resources.
Yeah.
Imagine if things weren't always getting cheaper, right? How hard would it be to afford even the basics?
Yeah, that's a good point. Now, the material that you shared uses this really interesting phrase.
Yeah.
It calls capitalism, it calls it a ruthless cage of competition. That sounds kind of scary,
It does, yeah.
But the point isn't that this ruthlessness is, aimed at us, the consumers, right?
Yeah.
It's aimed somewhere else.
Exactly. That ruthlessness is talking about the competition between producers.
Okay.
The businesses, the capitalists, they're all fighting to win over us.
Right, the consumer.
So consumers, exactly. And the driving force there is that they have to make things that are better and cheaper than their competitors.
Okay.
So it's not like they're trying to, squeeze the average person.
Yeah.
It's all about the businesses battling it out amongst themselves.
Right? So it's like they're in this cage and they got to keep innovating and offering good stuff, or they might go out of business.
They could lose a ton of money, yeah. Even go bankrupt.
So this constant, battle between companies to be better and cheaper,
Yeah.
what does that actually mean for us when we go to the store or shop online?
What it means is there's a constant stream of new and improved products coming out all the time.
Yep.
And the key thing is they get more affordable over time.
Right.
Think about all this stuff that used to be only for rich people.
Yeah.
Like televisions, computers, even something like a washing machine.
Yeah, those were luxuries at one point.
Right. Now they're pretty much everywhere and they're not that expensive.
That's true.
And that's because of capitalism.
Okay.
The competition drives innovation and efficiency. And eventually, everyone benefits from it.
That makes sense when you look at how things have changed over time.
Yeah.
But what about the people who are actually making all this stuff? The workers. We hear a lot about like tough working conditions and pressure on employees.
Yeah.
How does that fit into this whole idea
Yeah.
of capitalism being good for consumers?
That's a really good point. And it's important to consider that, some people might have a hard time at work.
Yeah.
Because of all this pressure to be competitive.
Right.
But the argument here is that overall, this pressure actually leads to a better standard of living for everyone.
Okay.
As consumers, I mean.
Right.
So even if it's tough on some workers, the drive to make things cheaper and more efficient ultimately means cheaper goods and services for everyone.
So it's like the producers might feel the squeeze.
Exactly.
But we, the consumers, get the benefits.
Yeah, that's the basic idea.
Okay, I see. So at the very root of all this, where does all this stuff that we consume, where does it even come from in the first place?
According to this perspective, it all comes down to a society's ability to produce.
Okay.
Like the more a society can produce, the more its people can consume.
So it's all about production.
Yeah.
Like that's the foundation.
Exactly. Production is the foundation for consumption.
No system is perfect.
Right.
I'm sure even this perspective acknowledges that capitalism has its flaws,
Oh, absolutely.
like inequality or maybe some industries struggling.
There's definitely recognition that injustices and unfairness can happen under capitalism.
Okay.
But the key question they ask is, can you find a system that does a better job overall? Like less injustice, more production, better working conditions, and everyone still gets to enjoy the same level of, stuff.
Right, the same access to goods and services.
Exactly. And they argue that. A lot of times when people try to create these perfect systems, things actually end up worse.
That's interesting. So when we talk about workers, this viewpoint also says that capitalism can actually be empowering for them, right?
Yes, because it creates jobs.
Okay.
The argument is that when you have a capitalist economy with tons of different businesses and ways to make money, it naturally creates more jobs.
Right.
And when workers have more choices about where to work, they have more power. They're not stuck with one employer.
Yeah.
If they don't like their job, they can leave.
Okay.
They have more bargaining power.
So it's different from a system where, the government is the only employer.
Exactly. In that case, workers have much less power.
Okay, so to kind of wrap things up, it's not about saying capitalism is perfect, right? It's more about shifting our focus.
Yeah.
From the producers, capitalists, to us, the consumers.
Exactly.
The main idea is that this whole system, with all its competition and pressure, it ends up making things cheaper and better for most of us.
Right, for the people who are actually buying and using these products.
Right, exactly.
It's about moving away from this idea that capitalism just helps the rich.
Okay.
And instead focusing on how it actually benefits everyone.
All the consumers.
All the consumers, no matter how much money they make.
So this deep dive into, the consumer-focused defense of capitalism, it really gives us a new way to think about economics and these systems.
It's interesting, right? It makes you think about who's really benefiting from all this innovation.
Yeah, it makes you think.
And it highlights how everyone benefits from lower prices and better quality, even if it doesn't always seem obvious.
Right. It challenges us to rethink some of the criticisms of capitalism and look at how it affects us in our everyday lives.
As consumers.
As consumers, exactly. So what really stands out to you when you look at it this way?
I think what's really fascinating is this idea that maybe the most powerful force in capitalism isn't the rich getting richer, but it's us.
The consumers.
The consumers. We're the ones driving the whole thing.
That's a really interesting way to look at it. It definitely gives us a lot to think about. Maybe looking at some historical examples of how consumer goods have changed under different economic systems. Could give us even more to chew on.
Yeah, that's a great idea. There's definitely a lot more to explore here.